Biomes are the world's major ecosystems, and they are classified based on the major types of vegetation that occupy the biome, in addition to the types of adaptations that organisms would have in order to be able to survive in that environment. So you may not have heard of the word biome before, but you've definitely heard of the different types of biomes. For example, the tropical forest, the desert, the grasslands. And what we're looking at here is a map showing you where you would be able to find each of the different biomes. Now remember that the key isn't that you have the same species, the key is that you have the same types of vegetation and that you have the same types of adaptations. So for example, in the tropical rainforests of Brazil, we wouldn't find the same species of plants that we would, for example, in Madagascar or Southeast Asia, but we would expect to find the same types of vegetations. For example, very tall, broadleaf trees. We would expect to find animals that have adaptations to live high up in the canopy. So for example, monkeys with long arms being able to swing around. If we then went to the desert, we wouldn't find the same types of vegetation. We'd find maybe short shrubs and grasses or cactuses, and types of animals that we would find would probably be more concerned about water consumption. We'd find camels with humps able to, go for weeks without drinking a single drop of water. And so the next question then becomes, well, what determines where we would find a biome? Like, why can I only find rainforests between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer? Why don't I find rainforests high up in the north around the poles? And the answer to that question is that most of the vegetation and therefore biomes where we would find them is determined by the type of weather and climate that would be in that area. So areas that would tend to have a warmer climate and a lot of precipitation, there we'll find tropical forest. If an area has a low amount of precipitation and it's warm, then we'll find a desert. If it has a low amount of precipitation and it's cold, then we would expect to find tundra. And so this climate graph is just trying to show you where we would expect to find certain biomes given these abiotic factors. Now, if you look at the graph, you'll notice that there are places where we would expect some of these biomes to overlap. So, for example, if you look here where the mouse is pointing, we have an overlap between the temperate and the tropical forest. And if you look here in this section of the climate graph, we can see that there's overlap between the temperate forest, coniferous forest, and grassland. So the question is, what's causing that overlap? Why in one place could we find grassland and in another we'd find coniferous forest? And although we can't tell in every single situation what that other factor is, it could be another abiotic factor such as wind. It could be a biotic factor such as there's some animal in the grassland, a grazing animal that's eating all the miniature or tiny coniferous baby plants, and so it's stunting their growth. They're not able to get very tall, and so that favors the formation of grassland. So not only are there terrestrial biomes, there's also marine biomes, and what you're looking at is a diagram here showing you some of the abiotic factors that affect what type of aquatic biome we would expect to find. So if you look at the top, you have the photic zone. This is where photosynthesis is occurring. It's as far as the light penetrates into the water. And below that you have the aphotic zone. This is the area of the ocean where there is no light. And organisms that live in this zone are either reliant upon the energy that is coming from the photic zone or coming from the deep sea vents down here at the bottom. But ultimately its source of energy is somewhere else. Okay? Okay. So that doesn't mean that you can't have a fish eating another fish in this area and getting its energy from there, but ultimately its original source was either from one of these two locations. Another biotic factor, or abiotic factor, sorry, that can affect aquatic biomes is the depth. And so what you're seeing here is the lighter continental shelf at the top, floating on top of the oceanic crust, and the deeper you go inside of the ocean, the more equipped that organisms have to be to deal with the pressure. You'll also notice that in the intertidal zone sometimes there is water covering that area, sometimes it's exposed to air, and so organisms living in the intertidal zone need to have special adaptations to survive both situations. What I want you to do here for next class is take a look at some of the aquatic biomes that you find in your textbook and just write two major points that you think are relevant to each of those biomes and have that ready for tomorrow's class.